Happy Halloween to Wolfpack Nation. You know what should be scary to the Wolfpack? Not Stanford.
You are Locked On Wolfpack, your daily podcast on the NC State Wolfpack, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, Wolfpack Nation? It's time to get locked in with Locked On. Thanks for making Locked On Wolfpack your first listen each and every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Our Thursday Halloween sponsor is FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 back in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. Head on over to FanDuel.com in order to get started. Happy Thursday to all. As always, I'm Grayson Boone, joined by former Wolfpack defensive tackle Kenton Gibbs. Today, we're going to dive into the details of Stanford. They're the next opponent on the schedule for NC State football, joining us on Saturday for our homecoming game. But before we get into that, we have a whole lot of nothing and a whole lot of something inspired by this upcoming matchup on Saturday. The first one here, Kenton, NC State is favored over a P4 school by double digits for the first time all season long. Whole lot of nothing, whole lot of something.
Well, Grayson, this line is a lot like the words jumbo and shrimp being put next to each other. It just doesn't make much sense. Let me tell you something. The reality is I think Stanford is a bad team. I think they're a really, really bad team. Actually, as bad as we thought Wake Forest was, I think Stanford is markedly worse.
They are.
That's just the truth of what I see here. However, just a quick question, Grayson. NC State's won 4 games this year. How many of them were against Power 4 teams?
Just one.
Just one. One was against the Cal Bears, who have lost to us and the one-win Florida State Seminoles. Okay? That was our only Power 4 win of the year. Do you know how much we beat the Cal Bears by?
1 point.
1 point. Where the hell is Vegas getting a 10.5 point spread from? What is up with this line? This is a whole lot of something if I have ever seen it. And let me tell you why. Sometimes I think Vegas gives away money, but it feels like Vegas knows something here.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like Vegas knows something that we don't in this instance, because I believe it opened up at 9.5 or 9 and has climbed. What do the sharps know? Because Vegas is one thing, but when the sharps are agreeing and driving the line up, there's something in the mist. In the words of Mr. Krabs, I smell a smelly smell in this one.
My initial reaction when I saw the lines come out on Sunday evening, I was a little bit surprised. And by a little bit, I mean a lot of bit surprised. 9.5 for it then to climb up to 10.5. I was instantly thinking, okay, somebody's hurt for Stanford. There's something going on that we don't know yet about. What does Vegas know? Because what are they seeing in NC State and what are they seeing in Stanford that the Wolfpack are a 10.5 point favorite? I looked into Stanford later in the week with some of the numbers they've been putting up, or maybe I should say some of the numbers they're not putting up. And I kind of got to understand a little bit more about why the spread would be favoring NC State. I still don't know how they arrived at 10.5. It feels a little bit too big. It feels a little trappish, but Vegas has to know something. They simply have to know something. Perhaps they also think NC State's going to finish 4-0 for the rest of the season, and they think it's going to start in exciting fashion on Saturday. Maybe that's the deal here. I guess we're going to have to find out, but it's a whole lot of something. I was shocked on Sunday that it's 10.5. I'm shocked on Thursday that it's 10.5. I might take them to hit it, though. I don't know. Maybe we're going to see a renewed offense for NC State. We'll find out. Our second one here, Peyton Wilson makes his return to Carter Finley Stadium on Saturday. He will be honored into the Ring of Honor for Pac football, and he'll also be the Alpha Wolf starter of the game. I think this is probably the fastest one ever in the history of our program. Whole lot of nothing, whole lot of something.
I'd say a whole lot of something because we've had some absolute studs. We've had some superstars. We've had some guys whose names are plastered through the record books. For example, Bradley Chubb, who I played with, didn't end up in the Wolfpack Hall Ring of Honor this quick. And he is the record holder for, I believe, most career sacks at NC State. So what a guy. And, let's just, if he doesn't have any eligibility, I wouldn't be upset if a linebacker by the name of Williamson Pate is playing in this game, because Lord knows our linebacker core needs all the help they can get at the moment. But in all seriousness, whole lot of something.
Wayton Pilson's going to line up at middle linebacker on Saturday, but
this walk-on, I've heard that Gibson's been holding open tryouts for who can fill an A-gap. I'm just saying.
For me, this is definitely a whole lot of something. And it's so cool that it is happening so quickly. And I remember tweeting, I think it was like last season when he picked off Cade Klubnik and he took it back for the touchdown. I think in that moment, I tweeted, I think Peyton Wilson just got himself in the Ring of Honor. Not only was it true, but then it happened faster than any other person in the history of the program. Deservedly so. A lot of us on Twitter were kind of rallying for Peyton to have 11 retired immediately at the end of last year. And we certainly knew it was going to happen eventually. And we hoped it would be this quick, but we didn't think it would actually happen. It's well-deserved. I can't wait to see Peyton on Saturday. And you hope that he spends a little bit of time in that locker room, perhaps lighting a fire under this team, and then they can finish on a run just like last year's team did. So it's definitely a whole lot of something. And another point here, I think for the younger guys that are in the program and they're still kind of figuring out what kind of collegiate career they want to have, or maybe the older guys that are still here at NC State waiting for their turn. When you see a guy like Peyton Wilson and became an instant legend at NC State, you would imagine he would inspire some kind of fire in these guys that they want to reach a level of stardom and greatness that he did. So not only is I think it well-deserved and the timing is good, but what better timing for this team to run into Peyton Wilson right before you're trying to end the year on a strong note. Definitely a whole lot of something. And last one here, it's not Stanford related, it's basketball related. NC State men's basketball kind of stumbles, kind of fumbles. They find a way to win, but they beat D2 Lees McRae by just 4 points in an exhibition game. Whole lot of nothing, whole lot of something.
I'm going to say whole lot of nothing only because this doesn't go in the record books. Doesn't go in the official record books. But I will say, if this team doesn't get it together, we got some drubbings on the way to start this season off. I mean, this is it feels like things are going to get rough early if we don't figure out how to take care of the ball a little bit better than what we did in this game. I believe there were 19 turnovers in this game. Let me tell you something. If you're playing a D2 school, okay, and your turnover tally is old enough to join the U.S. military, maybe pump the brakes a little bit. Maybe slow down the offensive pace. Maybe let's reel it back. Hold your horses because you're being a little bit unstable. So with that in mind, I really and truly would say a whole lot of nothing because it stays out of the record books. However, if we see this team have serious turnover problems during the season, it may have turned out that we were wrong, and this was a whole lot of something.
I think I'm at like a 3 out of 10 on the concern meter, so that would probably fall under a whole lot of nothing. It is an exhibition game. It does not count in the record book. None of the statistics are going to count in the record book. These games are just a glorified scrimmage. It's a tune-up before the tune-ups. So big picture, I'm not worried about exhibition games, not now, not ever. But I will tell you something that does worry me. Not only did we turn the ball over 19 times, we also missed 13 free throws. We shot 4 of 20 from three-point land, and we blew a 19-point lead in the second half. Now those, regardless of who you play, whether it's D2 Lees McRae or the Golden State Warriors, those are very concerning statistics. So if that level of play doesn't get cleaned up against USC Upstate, or when you go see Kansas in December, or you welcome Texas, you're going to get embarrassed. So I'm not concerned yet. I know a lot of folks are also concerned about guard Mike James. Apparently he's going to miss about 3 to 4 weeks with some kind of lingering knee injury. Now it's nothing major, so he will return to this year's team. That's good. And I think we can probably be fine in the early weeks without him. I just can't get myself to get worked up about an exhibition game. They just don't really matter that much. It's just a scrimmage. It's a practice game. That's all it is for now. However, we got our eyes on you. We're going to see how we do here when things actually count on Monday night. So for right now, whole lot of nothing. Coming up next, we're going to dive into the details of the Stanford Cardinal. This comes after a quick word from our sponsors. Our first Thursday sponsor is FanDuel. Get ready to tackle NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything that you need in order to place live bets on the NFL, all in just one location. When you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the very same page that you're placing all of your bets. You can head on over to FanDuel.com in order to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you just win that first pesky $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com in order to get started. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NFL. Middle portion of our Thursday show. Now time to dive into the Stanford Cardinal offense. Now, something I said a couple weeks ago, and I still stand by it. When we were going to play Wake Forest, I said they are a bad football team. I still think that is true, but that bad Wake Forest team, they just beat Stanford this past weekend. So what does that make Stanford? Well, what does that make us? We lost to Wake Forest. What does that make Stanford? That makes Stanford a bad football team. Offensively, Stanford scores the second least points per game in the ACC, just 19 and a half. They struggle scoring. They struggle passing the ball. They struggle running the ball. This is what, week 10 of the college football season. Stanford does not have a single rushing touchdown from a running back. In fact, they only have 4 rushing touchdowns all season long, and they all come from one guy who's a backup quarterback on this team. Stanford has really, really big issues on offense.
Yeah, the only team scoring less points than them is the Florida State Seminoles. The 1-7 Florida State Seminoles are the only team that has scored less points than them all season. Not only that, even if you go to the passing game, where obviously that's the strength of this team, whoop-de-woo-woo-woo, so on and so forth, where do you think they rank in the conference in that, Grayson?
It's got to be like last or second to last.
Correct. Dead last with 175.8 yards per game. I legitimately don't understand. Listen, with all due respect, these nerds can't formulate an offense. Okay. That's just the reality of what we're looking at. Now, please be aware, Grayson and I are talking very greasy because neither of us has to suit up on Saturday. Yeah. Grayson's time on the field is done or was not a thing. This is wrong field for Grayson. My time on this field is long gone. Okay. We are both very upset that the game is a noon kickoff because, tailgating at 10 is ill, gross.
Especially for homecoming.
Exactly. But we will be out there enjoying the festivities and hopefully enjoying a Wolfpack win, a handy Wolfpack win in which this team has this game under control early and does not relent. That is only because, again, this team, I struggle to find, and I'm not kidding when I say this, I struggle to find what they do well. I struggle to find, okay, what does Stanford just do a phenomenal, or not even phenomenal, what do they do a good job at? What are they doing an above average job at? I'm, like a 60-year-old couple that's trying to make a baby. I'm shooting blanks here. I've got nothing for you. So I don't know what you're doing in terms of Stanford and like saying, hey, offensively, because y'all know me and Grayson can always find something. We can find something on every offense. Even their star receiver, Alec Aymenor, has looked so pedestrian because of the quarterback play that just hasn't been able to get him the ball at a high level. We talk about Alec and what he is to this team. Just out of curiosity, Grayson, what do you think he ranks in the conference in terms of receiving yards?
It's got to be low just because they simply cannot get him the ball. However, that doesn't take away from his talent. He is probably one of the better receivers in the ACC, believe it or not. He is the Bugatti in the carport for Stanford football. But that doesn't take away from the fact that he's been relatively ineffective.
Oh, no. He's number 10 in the ACC. But again, he's their entire offense, basically.
Yeah.
Like, that's the part of this why it's so confusing. Because, in the words of, I believe it was Barry White, he's their first, their last, their everything. So I'm sitting here saying to myself, if it wasn't for that big mammoth of a wide receiver, if it wasn't for that guy who can make the contested catch, who can do special things with the ball in his hands after the catch, who, by the way, what a well-spoken young man. What a wonderful young man. If you hear him speak for any amount of time, you'll instantly know this is a young man with some manners with a serious future ahead of him. Duh, he goes to Stanford. But, again, that's pretty much the only thing that offense has going for him is Alec, and that's it. Nothing else.
If you go back a year ago, I think it's when they played like Colorado. They were down by a ton of points in the first half, and then Alec just went nuclear in the second half and ultimately won that game. I think he had close to like 300 reception yards in that game. It was absurd. He's capable of that type of performance. Now, being that he is really option A and option 1, that's all they have, it should be relatively simple for NC State's defense to draw up a plan, as in, don't let that guy beat you. Because honestly, Stanford doesn't have anyone else that can rise to the occasion and take this game over like Alec can. So if you take him out of it, I'm sorry to tell you, they just don't have it. They don't have anything for NC State. Perhaps that explains why the point spread is so relatively large. They can't score the football. They can't move the ball down the field. They can't run it. They struggle passing it. Ashton Daniels, their quarterback, he's even missed some time due to injury. It's just been a true train wreck of a season for Stanford. So we say all that to say there's no reason to make someone a hero for a day, or at least a team a hero for the day. Do not allow lowly Stanford to come in with all of their offensive issues and suddenly, just for a day, they solve it and they look like a completely new football team. If that happens, buddy, that is doomsday. That is rock bottom. That is the worst possible scenario for NC State you could possibly have this season. We were talking about this off air before we jumped on here. If NC State were to lose this game because of the lack of talent that Stanford has, this would be unequivocally the worst loss of the Dave Doeren era. Now, you might have already had that earlier this season when you lost to Wake Forest. This would be exponentially worse. That's how bad.
I disagree. I think that Boston College loss a couple years ago.
That's probably top 3.
That was one that was the one for me because it broke so many things. It ruined senior night for a senior class that objectively was the class that got the ball rolling to turn this program around to some extent. They were the class to save Doran's job. Let's not joke about it. Let's not make any bones about it. That's who they were. And we ended up losing to a team that was in a very similar vein. But either way you cut it or slice it, regardless of how you want to play semantics with which loss is the worst, I think this one would be number 1 by a mile.
Yeah. So, again, just to reiterate here, Ashton Daniels, he is the quarterback, only 941 passing yards, 6 passing touchdowns, 8 interceptions. Hello, defense. This is your chance to stand on business here. Ashton Daniels is also the leading rusher on this team, 352 yards, no rushing touchdowns. Remember, I already told you they don't have any rushing touchdowns from a running back or a starting quarterback. Their backup quarterback has not one, but all 4 rushing touchdowns they have all year. This offense is inept. Their coaching staff has been inept. Do not allow this team to come in and magically move the ball and score points against you. Simply cannot happen. That's all I got for the Stanford offense. Coming up next, we're going to dive into the details of Stanford's defense, and that conversation will probably roll into what should NC State's offense do on Saturday. But before then, a quick word from our sponsors. Our second Thursday sponsor is 5 Hour Energy. Our friends over at 5 Hour Energy know that being a passionate football fan isn't just a hobby, it's a way of life. It takes a lot of energy to power through all-day tailgates, especially on Saturday when you got to get up early for a noon game. Touchdown celebrations or agonizing a second overtime, 5-hour energy will keep you going. This is why they've created Stand the Fan 5-hour energy shot, a special flavor called Fan Fuel, the energy shot that's made for super fans just like us. 5-hour energy knows that no matter what team you root for, being a fan requires heart, soul, and a whole lot of energy. Whether you're prepping for the big tailgate or ironing your jersey, your game day to-do list is always a mile long. That's why the limited edition Stand the Fan 5-hour energy shot is here to help keep you fueled throughout the rest of the season. What's your fan fuel this week? Whatever it is, do it with a 5-hour energy. Available on the 5hourenergy.com website, shipped nationwide. Last couple of minutes of our Thursday show, now diving into the details of the Stanford defense. Well, they kind of stink too. I'll be honest with you. Stanford's defense, they really don't have much to show for either. They're actually 7th in the ACC in run defense. They're 15th in the ACC in pass defense. So in NC State terms, throw the ball, spread the field, do what has worked best for you all season long. That is throw the ball. Now, we've also talked about NC State needs to establish some semblance of a running offense. That part is still true. But CJ Bailey in this game, he's got to cook. I'm looking for NC State to light it up through the air, as they should, because Stanford does not have a defense that'll provide you a ton of resistance.
So I want to make one very clear point here, right? Because I know people are going to say, hey, you all are throwing rocks out of a glass house. We know that NC State right now is a below average team.
Yes.
We know that, right? And we know statistically, some of the statistics are a little bit skewed against NC State in certain ways, not because the statistics were intentionally skewed, just because of the way things work out, right? For example, NC State is the second worst scoring defense in the conference, only ahead of guess who?
Stanford.
Stanford, correct. They're the second worst scoring defense, only in front of Stanford. However, that is heavily, and when I say heavily, I mean heavily weighted by allowing 110 points in 2 games to Clemson and Tennessee. Other than those games, even if you include the Power 5 or Power 4 teams we played, every ACC game we played, we have only allowed 30 points one singular time outside of that, and that was in the loss to Wake Forest. Other than that, 24 against Cal, 24 against Syracuse. You're looking at 24 against Northern Illinois. You're looking at 20 against Louisiana Tech. You're looking at 21 against Western Carolina, as opposed to a Stanford team that these results look a little bit different, because even if I take out the 2 highest scoring games against them, which would be Clemson and Notre Dame, you still have SMU putting up 40 on them. You still have TCU putting up 34 on them. You still have Virginia Tech putting up 31 on them. So there's a little bit of a difference between a team that had their doors blown off a couple times and a team that you can expect every time they walk out on that field for them to be on the receiving end of their opponent laying down the law, per se. So, I look at this situation and I say to myself, what does Stanford do well defensively? And I believe it's a lot like their offense. They've got one guy and one guy only. And their one guy here is a linebacker that is near the top of the conference in tackles. And that young man is Tristan Sinclair, rather. When you see 8, just know he is coming with bad intentions. He is a poor man's Peyton Wilson in essence. He flies around with his hair on fire. He does it all for that team. He is an absolute stud. The problem is that young man is a Ferrari in the middle of the worst. And when I say the worst, I mean I wouldn't even say hood or ghetto or favela. This is the man that's a Ferrari in a shanty town. If you don't know what those are, Google it. Go back to middle school history. I am telling you right now, there is let's bring it to more recent terms. He is a Ferrari in a homeless encampment, if you will, because that brother can ball. The guys around him, not so much. not so much.
Something we've talked a lot about these last couple of weeks is how important the turnover margin is. Stanford this year, they have one win over a P4 opponent. It was actually on the road against Syracuse. In that game, Stanford won by 2 points. It was closely contested. I thought Syracuse should have won by a lot of points, but they played awful. Kyle McCord threw 2 picks in that game. One of them went for a pick six. The other resulted in a Stanford field goal. So I just told you, Stanford won this game by 2 points. They had 10 points off of turnover. In my mind, that's the reason they won that game. In the rest of Stanford's losses of recent, when they've been getting their brains beat in week after week after week, they're repeatedly losing or at least tying in their turnover margin. They struggle a lot in both generating turnovers and then capitalizing on said turnovers. So in this game, if CJ Bailey is not putting the ball in jeopardy, like he's done a pretty good job of recently, if we're not putting the ball on the ground, fumbling it, or maybe even muffing a punt or two, can't have that anymore. I don't see a world in which Stanford is better than NC State in like almost any singular category in this game. Offensively, defensively, special teams, all of it. If NC State takes care of the ball, this game is a wrap. Now, it's one thing to say it. It's another thing to do it. CJ Bailey's going to have to play another clean game. We know that he can, but he's going to have to do it against the Stanford defense. Just because Stanford's defense has struggled for much of the year, it doesn't mean that they won't beat you if they pick you off a couple times. Again, look at Syracuse. Kyle McCord, until he had a meltdown out at Pittsburgh, he's been one of the better quarterbacks in the country the whole entire year. Stanford's defense found a way to beat him. Yeah. If they found a way to beat Kyle McCord, they can find a way to beat CJ Bailey. Don't sleep on this team, but also understand they don't have the horses to run with ours. This is a game I want to see Justin Jolie go crazy. I want to see Hollywood Smothers go crazy. I want to see Noah Rogers go crazy. I would also like to see Wesley Grimes get in the end zone for the first time this year. I think he deserves it, okay? This is a game where NC State needs to do what NC State does best. Spin the rock, take care of the football, and be the more physical team.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I look at this and I say to myself, we have talked about this all year. And fans of other teams have gotten upset with me for saying this, but I still stand by it. And if there's any game where this rings true, it is this one more than any other this season, except for maybe Western Carolina. This game is about NC State.
Yeah.
This game will not come down to if Stanford plays the game of their lives and NC State plays at like 75% capacity, NC State probably wins that game. The only way you lose this game is if you are just so dysfunctional within yourself, if you are imploding within yourself, if your effort is so poor within yourself, if your run fits are so poor within yourself that you then, like Grayson said earlier, turn these guys into stars for a day.
Yep.
And the words are twisted back in that song in 03 or 04, you're going to make them a celebrity overnight. That is not something you want to see in this game. It is homecoming. And as the Saints would say, get right, church, and let's go home.
I'm very excited to see, hopefully, a renewed energy in this Pac football team. They've talked about going 4-0, but you can't do that unless you win the first one. That'll do it for us here on Thursday. As always, thank you all so much for joining us. Be sure to hit that like button. Drop your comments in the comment box. Tell us what you think about NC State basketball's scrimmage on Wednesday night. Tell us what you think about facing Stanford on Saturday. Seeing Peyton Wilson again, his name being honored in the Ring of Honor. That is outstanding. I'm very excited for that. Any other thoughts you have on the Stanford Cardinal, throw that in the box as well. Mash that subscribe button. We'll see you back here tomorrow on Friday for Kenton's Keys, Fan Friday, and our final thoughts ahead of kickoff for homecoming. Until then, go Pack.
Go Pack.